So this time on Cinematic Perspective, at the time of this recording, which is late October, we're about a week to 10 days past an incident on the set of a Western starring Alec Baldwin, where Alec Baldwin accidentally shot and killed the director of photography and then injured the director. So as of this time, we don't really know where that is going to end up at, what the final conclusion will be. But we've been inspired, for better or for worse, in this episode to talk about safety and safety issues on set, some of our experiences, some of the things that have happened to us, and some of the pros and cons of physical effects, gunfire on set, practical versus digital, and the many things that this is going to splinter off into, because it's Cinematic Perspective and it's us, and it's going to splinter off into other things. So, and I have a pronouncement, I have a kind of I have an idea, I have a sense of what's going to happen on this whole thing with the Alec Baldwin film and the shooting death. But we'll talk about that closer to the end, and I'll tell you where I think, without knowing where it's going to end up by the time this episode airs, I'm going to tell you where I think it's going to end up, and then we'll find out. We'll find out. History will tell us where it's going to end up.
I can add at this time, having spoken to some people who, obviously new people on set, what the conversation is like a week after.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of the experience that we have had has been obviously in the Hollywood industry. Both Wyatt and myself. Gayle, did you ever get a chance to work kind of in LA
No, I was never in LA.
a film?
All my production's been in the Midwest.
But the majority of the work that I have done, and definitely the work that I've really enjoyed, has been independent, low budget projects. Just recently, I was actually saying, someone asked me why I left LA and the industry, and I was like, I just didn't have fun anymore. And a lot of what's being discussed now because of the film and the accident, which is really a tragedy, it's not just an accident, really brought home why I made the decisions that I made. Making a film is tough. It's tough if you're an independent. It's tough if you're in the industry. Don't think that suddenly walking into the gates of Paramount or Sony or whatever company that, I was going to say Universal, being the big three, suddenly, you get there at 9 a.m. and they've got breakfast for you, and then the whistle blows at 1 o'clock and you go into the commissary and you get a meal, and then you get your hour. The industry has really evolved into trying to make things as quickly and as fast as possible. And in fact, just before this accident, there was a lot of conversation about the union striking for better, not wages, but a better deal and better practices on set. It's not uncommon for people to do 12, 14, 16-hour days, then get into their car and actually have an accident trying to drive home, and then have a small turnaround, get back in their car and go and do that again. In fact, in one group that I am a member of, I just posted an interview with John Carpenter in 2016, talking about how people were losing their lives trying to travel back and forth from sets because of the long hours, and that whoever works out how to change that is going to make a fortune. So really, whatever caused this accident, I think is wrapped up in a whole lot of things that we would like to discuss on this episode. Just to, if you work in the industry, you know what we're going to be talking about. If you would like to enter the industry, maybe as a director or maybe as a crew person, you will very quickly become familiar with what we're discussing. But it also helps to have a heads up, because my experience was an eye-opener. I thought, I used to do things in Australia that were incredibly dangerous compared to things that are happening in Hollywood, and vice versa.
Well, and I think you touch on something, which is it's important to acknowledge that there's many different safety issues for many different reasons on many different levels of film. I think it's important to define that a lot of times, like, we've talked about the stupid things we did when we were kids, and the countless number of stories about filmmakers with their Super 8 cameras in a backyard somewhere, and they put an M80 on somebody and light the fuse and then roll the camera and, the guy gets shot. Kids getting hurt with stuff. We've done an episode about the movie Dune. I am one of a couple of kids who put blue food coloring drops in his eye.
No, seriously?
To turn my eye blue.
Holy cow.
Really?
And it works. Is it a smart thing to do? No, it's not a smart thing to do.
Should I call you Moadib? I don't know what I should do now.
Moadib. You shall be known as Moadib.
Wyatt. No, sorry.
So there's danger that comes out of inexperience and not knowing better.
There's danger that comes out of lack of budget as well.
Right. There's danger from lack of ignorance. There's danger from ignorance. There's danger from lack of budget. There's danger from what would you call it? Ambition. My ambition is larger than my budget and schedule will allow. And I think it takes filmmakers a long time. I know I'm at this place as a filmmaker where I look at something and I go, we just don't have the time and the resources to pull this off. So we either need to wait until we do, or we need to modify what we're doing.
Sorry, can I add just one other thing to that list? And I think excitement. When you're on a set, when you have an opportunity, when you want to impress, when you want to do something larger than life, there's a certain excitement that goes along with that sometimes gets in the way of slowing down enough to go, hey. Because I remember also being on set where someone said, what about this? And I went, I can do it. And I wanted to make sure that I had the chance to do it before someone said, hey, actually, this is dangerous. Do we want Gil doing that? Because I wanted to prove my chops. I wanted, there are things that I did in my career that I have literally woken up in the middle of the night as someone with a little bit more experience under my belt and went, my God, I should have been dead. Or, not only should I have been dead, there was a possibility of actually harming someone else. That I have woken up, shivering and covered in sweat, going, if I had that over again, I would never have even thought, let alone have done that. And that comes with experience, and that's something that's being discussed right now about the Western and the people who were top, what they call top tier, responsible roles. There's a big conversation about, can you give that role to someone in their early 20s that hasn't been around a set, hasn't been around, a situation. An expert is someone who just doesn't think about what needs to be done, but does it through reflex because they've been through that situation time and time again. And again, keeping a budget on track and in budget. Sometimes people don't want to pay someone who's had 30 years experience. It's heartbreaking.
There's another level of danger that comes from, I don't know if we have any more categories than this, but the other category would be danger that comes from exhaustion.
Absolutely.
Being on set too long, poor decisions, exhaustion in driving home, judgment calls on set get milky. I'm going to go ahead at this point and go ahead and say what I think.
As far as the dust?
As far as, was it Rust?
Rust.
I think the film was called, the Alec Baldwin film was called Rust. So much of this relates to online discussions and Facebook discussions, and some of that's bullshit, and some of it is solid. Like you said, you're part of group. You're involved in groups online that are crew professionals discussing these things, and a lot of my friends on Facebook are actual working professionals. It was interesting because somebody made the statement, Alec Baldwin is 100% not responsible for killing this person. And I would say Alec Baldwin is like 85% not responsible for killing this person, because as a producer, did he consciously set out, is this manslaughter? No, it's not. But as a producer, if you've heard that your crew is unhappy, that the hours are too long, if you've had crew members that have walked, and at the time of the shooting, if you've already had a couple of misfires with your prop weapons on set, as a producer, it is part of your responsibility to make things run more smoothly, to address issues. If you hear that there are safety issues, so...
Just right out the gate, just having read that there were 500 rounds of actual bullets on set.
Was it 500? Say, I haven't heard a number.
did they collect 500 bullets and
They
they were
collected
going...
600 items of evidence.
Right.
500 of those were live rounds of actual bullets.
You've read that.
I read
That's
that.
what you... Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so I haven't heard that, but I do know that they did find some live rounds, and we'll go into why that possibly could have been there. I do want to go back to what you were saying about Alec Baldwin being the producer and an actor, and I do want to ask, because there are different levels of procedures and safety procedures depending on where you are.
Right.
But so the very first time I ever came across a live firearm was on an independent film in Australia. We had a locked off set, and the armorer gave out these pistols to each person and basically let them do whatever they wanted to do. And we were 20-something-year-old guys, so we were walking around posing, racking the slide, the whole bit.
And when you say live, you mean they had blank rounds in them?
No, they didn't have any rounds in them.
Oh, okay.
But they were operational firearms. If I put a bullet in there, it would have fired. So I do want. So there was. He controlled the ammunition as such, the blanks and everything else, because that's what we were being charged on. You fire it, there's a cost involved.
Right.
But no one was coming in on set, and the idea was here's 10 firearms, which in Australia are incredibly controlled. So this is very much the first time anyone's ever, held a real firearm for the first time. And, they got handed out at the start of the day, and they came back. And I remember one friend of the director's, who I happen to know socially, he had this big Desert Eagle, and he went and he grabbed it, and he went and slide the magazine back, and it locked open. And he kind of came up to me, at the time I was working as the camera person, and he's like, "Gil, you know about this sort of stuff, don't you?" And I'm like, "What's going on?" He goes, "I think I broke it." And as a joke, I said, "Throw it over the fence so no one sees it." And I'll never forget, he pulled his hand back to throw it, and I grabbed his arm and I said, "What are you doing?" I said, "I'm being smart here. There's a playground just beyond where we're working. Some kid's going to find it, and you think the guy's not going to ask you what's going on?" He goes, "Yeah, but I think I broke it." I said, "No problems." I remember I took the gun, I went back to the armorist who I knew, and I said, "These guys are shit scared that they broke your gun." He laughed. There was a safety thing on this thing. So he clicked it. He gave it back to me. He said, "Give it back to them. It's fine." That was my first experience. When we shot, he would load up the firearm. We took it slow. Bang, 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 bang. I think we also had like a Mac 10 or something. So that was the big money maker, because some guy gets shot and fires in the air and lots of spray. He collected the firearms, and that was it. And I thought, this is the procedure.
Based on Gil's story, I'm going to interrupt for just a second. There's one other category then for safety and why things go wrong, and that would be stupidity.
Absolutely.
Well, yeah.
Let's throw a firearm into the playground.
I would classify that along with inexperience, but no, I mean, sometimes there's stupidity.
Yeah.
Sometimes there
was even a moment where we did something dangerous. Now, we had a safety briefing, and he said, "Do not fire it near someone's head." And in the gunplay walkthrough of basically what happened was, this was an independent film, and everyone who was going to be firing guns were either crew who had been on with the project, so we were doing like guest roles. I think in that role I had if I remember correctly, it was a pillowcase over my head because I played another character, and I had some sunglasses over that, so I was like this kind of freaky guy with a pillowcase, and it was friends of the directors. So there were people who liked films, but had never done anything like that.
Hey, this is Wyatt from the Cinematic Perspective podcast. If you've been listening to the podcast, then you know that Gayle and I are part of a company called Pirate Pictures, and we make movies. So I wanted to take a moment and tell you about some of the movies we've made and how you can see them. My first feature film as a writer-director was Shadowland. It's the story of a vampire that was staked through the heart, buried, and left for dead in 1897, but then is accidentally uncovered and awakened in modern day. Laura, the vampire, suffers from amnesia and has no idea who she is, or even that she is a vampire. Shadowland is an independent film that was shot in the St. Louis area, and I'm very proud of it. You can buy or rent Shadowland at piratemediagroup.net.
In one of the guys was wearing a nice big kind of Don Post rubber mask, and someone had pulled the pistol out and fired it, and it happened to fire it right next to his ear. And did the shit hit the fan? Did we get stopped and all the rest of it? The armorist was terrified there was any ear damage. I remember him going and kind of rubbing the guy's ear and can you hear? And can you hear this? And can you hear this? And he chewed out the guy who pulled the trigger. He said, the one thing I told you not to do, you did.
Right.
To us, it was, there's no real danger here. It's just sound. It's not the blank, firing actually can create a pressure wave that if you're too close to someone,
right?
Because in the case of John Eric Hexum, like he put a blank to his head in the 80s, and he actually pushed part of his skull into his brain and killed himself.
Just from the air pressure.
Well, not really understanding what was going on. Like you think, oh, it's a blank gun, it's not harmful, but then there's that lack of education.
It's a cap gun, right? It just makes noise.
But it's making an incredibly loud and forceful noise, yeah.
But what actually happens is that in blanks, instead of having a bullet there, they place either some wadding or maybe a piece of paper that holds the powder there, but that charge is the same. So all that force is going out. It's just not pushing a bullet. So if you happen to put a barrel up against something or close to something, that force is then transmitted from the barrel out towards whatever it's going to hit. And that's actually the same mechanics that ended up killing Brandon Lee in The Crow, because there was a bullet wedged in the barrel, and then that force pushed that barrel at speed that actually hit him, was able to penetrate his body and shoot him in the stomach and kill him. So these things, my first experience was like, oh, it's just like a cap gun. I then come to LA, I study, I get a job, and something really unique happens. I meet my first professional armorist who not only does a safety check that everyone is around, understanding there's a firearm that can be fired, right? But I remember they said, you can come and inspect the firearm. So I didn't understand that until I was actually behind a camera where the firearm was going to be pointed at me, and someone said, are you going to check it? And I followed someone up, and the armorist would take the firearm, open it up, check the barrel in front of you, show you that there's blanks, so that you understood. And any crew member that felt that they needed for it to be checked could ask the armorist to check it. It was not a slight on his ability. It was put in place so that the crew member didn't have to be like ducking down or away
checks
if
and
it's
balances,
too close.
yeah.
But there were many different checks. That was the armorist. The AD, the assistant director, would also check it before the scene would happen.
Right.
In the case that I worked under, the actor also would check the firearm before, so that the actor knew that it was 100%, there was a blank, that there's nothing in the barrel. Now, this is why I wanted to go into this. As the actor, Baldwin the actor, I would have expected him to have checked the weapon.
Right.
Do you open it up? Because that's the experience that I've had on multiple sets. Even for a rehearsal, the onus is on you.
And again, not knowing what was going on that set, but if you're running short on time and all that, then there's that.
Was there a relaxation of standards where Alec Baldwin just took the guy's word for it? He grabbed the gun off the cart saying, well, it's on the cart, this is supposed to be the safe one. He grabbed it. He didn't check it.
Not the armorist.
Well, yes, you're right. Like the AD.
Wait. The issue is the chain. The armorist should have been the person to take the weapon from the cart, check it, and then hand it to the actor. I've never heard of an AD ever handing a firearm to an actor and declaring it. It's always the armorist's job. They're one job. That's all you got to do. The other thing that's really interesting is, as the actor as well, why would you have your finger on the trigger through a rehearsal? Now, I don't know whether that's a method thing.
You get excited. You get wound up. Yeah.
But again, that excitement thing comes into it. We know that the trigger was pulled. A bullet was fired. There's a lot of questions you need to ask. Why was there a live round in the gun? Where was the armorist? Why was the AD declaring something being cold when that's not his job and position? It is his job to make sure he's the final line of safety.
Right.
I remember getting in an argument years ago on an independent where the AD didn't call something for safety, and as the cinematographer on that I did.
Right.
I got yelled at by the producer who said, that's not your job. And I did point out that the AD who saw it didn't call the issue, what was I supposed to do? And I ended up having to walk off that job because they ended up doing something that basically could have taken the life of a PA.
Yeah.
And egos get involved. Unfortunately, you just tapped into a major thing. Egos get involved. I've been on sets before where something dangerous is happening and I call it out and I piss people off. And it's not about the fact that I tried to say, well, let's measure dicks. My dick is bigger than yours. That wasn't what was going on. It's like, dude, this is a bad situation here. This is not safe. A couple of experiences I've had. We helped produce a fundraising video for a Western, ironically, a few years ago that our friend Jason Contini wrote and wanted to direct, and we were trying to set out to raise the funds. And we haven't raised the funds, but we put together a really nice trailer for this Western.
So if anybody would like to fund our Western,
it's called Retribution.
Let us
anyway, that's a whole another kettle of fish.
Who stars in it?
Well, definitely Jason Contini's father, John Contini, was going to be one of the leads, but we were going to pull in some name actors, and we were trying to raise the money to pull in said name actors. So anyway... on
the trailer?
On the trailer, you had a very tight and controlled group of people. And I did probably what would have been considered a couple of faux pas, because I was actually the DP on this trailer. And we were sort of pooling our resources, and he had some mock prop weapons that he was using that he purchased that were non-functional, 1850s era revolvers. I had an old single-shot rifle that I loaned to the production and one of the actors carried in the scenes. But I took the actor aside. I said, here is your gun. And I dismantled it, and I said, there's nothing in the barrel. And I said, look, the clip is not even in the gun. Like, literally, you can't even put the mechanism in that supplies the bullets. We had no bullets on set. We were never firing blank rounds. So there was a situation where an actual theory... In honesty, in the entire time I've owned this antique weapon, I have never fired it. I wouldn't fire it without taking it to a gun professional.
Oh, to make sure that it's not going to blow up?
I don't know if it is fireable, but it looked good on camera. So there was one example of a use of a gun on set. Another thing...
Can I jump in with one?
Sure.
So, again, Wyatt and I working together, we were working with a young friend of ours who was doing a film, and we were filming in the downtown area. And we had let the police know that we were going to be filming, but we didn't actually and it was an airsoft gun, but we didn't actually have an official armorist. We had armorer.
Yeah.
But the gal that was kind of handling props was in charge of this gun. And I look over at one point, and we're down in this parking lot in an alley, and the gun is just laying there on the ground because she's just kind of flighty and just visiting with other people. And I'm like, what is going on here? So literally we are downtown where the public is walking around. There's homeless people walking around. And there's a gun laying there. And I kind of lost my shit on this because I was like, this is so unsafe. And
it's unprofessional as well.
Yeah, eventually...
Incredibly unprofessional.
One of the audio guys, the assistant audio guy, who had been military, I'm like, would you please just keep an eye on this for us? And yeah, that was kind of...
Well, that was another case, too, of like guns, people walking around with guns in their belt and brandishing them and gesturing with them and stuff like that. And again, that seems very innocent, but much like what happened on Rust, yeah, it's very innocent. And yeah, when I brought this in today, this gun was an airsoft prop. I don't know, if you don't know what happened to it from 8 a.m. to the time you're shooting the scene.
From when we left it laying in the parking lot.
Do you even know, like some of the airsoft guns, you can pump up the air in them. Is there a pellet in it? Is a pellet going to kill somebody? No. Could it put out an eye?
Did you pick up any gravel because it was laying on the
ground?
ground?
Could it damage an ear? Could Could there have been something old lodged in it from? It's just a matter of conduct. I have experience as an actor with being squibbed multiple times. In the film Guyver Dark Hero, which, yes, we'll talk about Guyvers, plural, at some point. I was squibbed multiple times. In the beginning of Guyver Dark Hero, I'm playing a police officer named Donnie, and Donnie gets in a fight with a bad guy, and the bad guy turns around and unloads a clip on him, and boom, 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 the whole classic. And that was all about being wired up with the little metal and leather pads that were taped to my undershirt, and then my police uniform was laid over that, and there were little explosive squibs pointing outward, and then the wires all ran down my leg to like a nail board where you could set off the charges in sequence. And the procedure there was very thorough and very careful, and then we did like a non-powered rehearsal where he went bang, 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 and I reacted, and he got upset because he's like, I don't want you grabbing at the bullet hits as you get hit because you're going to have your arms in the way, and the squibs are going to hit
the guy controlling
you.
it.
The guy controlling it. Oh. So it was a very thorough process. So then I had to get my head around the idea that I'm going to get riddled with bullets, and I have to react without grabbing at myself like I probably would
Right,
have.
if you got hit, that would be.
And then, I collapsed on the floor, and I think in one of the original shots you could see the bundle of wires coming out of my leg. So it's all very fun and interesting, and it leads to great effect. I mean, there's actual pops coming out of my body in some films.
But were there any blanks coming out of the actual gun at that point?
But in a different shot. So It was one shot of an actor pulling a gun out and unloading with a blank gun to nothing. And then a cutaway, a reverse to me getting hit. So we weren't doing them in the same shot. We were doing them in separate shots.
In a very controlled situation, too.
Yes, in a very controlled situation. Yeah.
Your brain would think, oh, someone's shooting at Wyatt, and therefore it's all happening. No, you slow it down. If you've got a close up of a pistol, you can put the camera. You can have even the camera person away if it's in that direction, and then you just cut it together. That's the magic of filmmaking.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's interesting. I'm describing all of that to you. And Baldwin has been involved. It's fascinating to think about what happened. Because Baldwin himself, you look back at a film he did called The Getaway, which was a remake of a classic Steve McQueen film. But he did The Getaway with Kim Basinger. And there are scenes in that. There's a gunfight at the end of that film where, like, his face is in frame. He's firing at things. And he's, like, next to, like, the banister on a staircase, and he fires and he pulls back and the banister explodes. So there was like some really close quarters, electronically timed stuff in that film. And you would think with something like that and his involvement in things like that he'd be more aware. But again, you're on set, you're tired, it's long hours, a series of bad decisions that can lead to, disaster.
When it comes to films with action films and all the rest of it, I was also thinking of The Shadow, where he was the lead.
Yeah.
And there was lots and lots of gunplay in that film. And again, depending on where you are, actors, if they are required to use firearms in a scene, will actually get firearms training. Again, that's why, for me personally, I don't understand why you would have your finger on the trigger,
right.
Unless you were actually going to pull the trigger. I have a photo on Facebook where someone handed me a prop version of a pulse rifle from Aliens.
Sure.
And it's all plastic.
Right.
There's nothing real. But I'm holding it up, and my finger is on the side. And someone actually commented, "Gayle, you've got good trigger discipline."
Yeah.
And I said, the funny thing is, it's not even real.
Right.
And he said, no, it's good because even if you're training yourself already not to put your finger on the trigger on a toy, basically, for whatever reason, it means that if you ever have to deal with a real thing, you'll do that without even thinking. I had friends of mine who we went to a shooting range in California. The person who I went with happened to be a U.S. Marines firearm instructor. And I'll never forget, he said to me, I'm going to give you this. And I think he gave me like a 22 or something like that with a clip. And he goes, I'm going to just watch you with it. And I said, okay. So I did what I needed to do. He said, go, feel free to fire on the range. And 30 seconds later, he goes, you're fine. And I said, what were you looking for? He goes, you didn't swing the muzzle around. You didn't put your finger on the trigger. You respected the weapon. I know that I don't have to keep an eye on you to do something stupid.
Respect.
Yeah.
Respect. I was raised with guns. My father bought, sold, and traded guns. He repaired and restored guns. People say to me, well, what was so different back then, Wyatt? Why are you so worried about guns now? Because I like guns, and I feel people should own guns. But I say it was a different time. Like, yeah, old man, sure, it was a different time. No, when I was a kid and we shot guns, you lived in perpetual fear that you were going to screw up and your dad was going to get mad at you. It's that whole older discipline versus newer discipline. But it's like you didn't dare screw up with a gun because you knew how serious it was. And you'd seen Dad blow up a target with a shotgun. You'd seen Dad go hunting. You'd see him shoot a bird out of the air. You knew what a gun could do. And it's important to have that. It's like I work a lot with power tools. I work a lot with drills, saws, chop saws, table saws.
You have all your fingers.
I have such a healthy respect for power tools. And I freak myself out a little some of the times. But like you said, I still have all my fingers. I know some people who don't have all their fingers.
That happens to be the only promise I have with my partner, which is when I go into a workshop that I leave with the same amount of fingers that I entered into. And that's not a joke. Like there are times where I'll be doing something and I'll do this to remind myself, don't take a shortcut. It's interesting that you should talk about growing up around firearms. In Australia, we are very limited. So I didn't have that experience. In fact, I come from a family that is very anti-gun. But I always had an interest. And my interest wasn't just to go out and plink or fire them. It was the history, the design, all the things that tie into it, including the relationship that we have in society with firearms. It's very different here in Australia than it is from America. And when I went to UCLA to study, part of the opportunity that I had as an exchange student was to take a sport. And ironically, one of the sports that you could take was shooting, because the UCLA shooting team comprised the majority of the U.S. Olympic shooting team.
Sure.
And I didn't know that at the time. I thought this is an opportunity to get some experience. They took it incredibly serious. I was trained by basically like an Olympic coach. We got drilled very, very quickly of what the safe things were to do, how to make a firearm safe. So if you happen to see something and you need to make it safe, open the action up. Action's open, it will never fire. This is how you remove something. This is how, we also were instructed, if you walk into a room and 3 people have shot themselves, what to do when you call the police to make sure that the situation is safe without contaminating anything.
Right.
It gave me a real respect for what these could do. And I actually also happened to have a situation where I was at a competition, because we went to competitions because you have to have gradings. And I was like the 11th person along a 30 people lined up doing target shooting. And I was looking down the barrel of my rifle, and I saw a wild boar walking from the right across the target. And I was surprised that no one had called stop. So immediately I called stop. The boar was coming from my right across to my left, which meant I was number 11, and everyone else up to 30. So the majority of people. And when the judge started asking people, what they had done was they saw the boar and stopped firing, let him pass, and just continued firing. And the next person had to deal with it. And it took the majority of shooters, didn't say anything until it got to me, and I called a safety stop, which is drilled into you. Do not take a chance. And why should this boar be shot? Because, you didn't want to break your rhythm. I got into a little bit of trouble because there were something like 20 members of the team. Well, 9 of them got an official warning that first time. And in shooting, if you get 2 warnings, you can't compete. So the coach officially had to say, wrong thing you did. And then afterwards said to me, you did exactly the right thing. I actually have to now have a conversation with the whole team because I'm incredibly disappointed that there were
Right.
something like, 9 members who didn't call stop, which means that if we are training, I now have doubt whether they will call stop in a situation.
Let's translate that to a film set. What's the worst that can happen? You say stop. Let's not do this. You come back and shoot it another day. You shoot it next week. You shoot it. There's such a fear in filmmaking. It's funny. I take filmmaking so seriously. It's my livelihood. It's my passion. But what's the worst thing that happens if I don't get the shot?
Right.
I get it another day. Nobody dies. The world doesn't stop spinning. I don't lose $1 million. It's fascinating that people get so wound up about filmmaking and they take it so seriously, and the push gets on and everybody gets so passionate on set, like this is the most serious thing in the world. And I'll be the first one to say, as passionate as I am about film, it's not the most serious thing in the world, and it's not the end of the day. So save a life. Don't injure somebody. It's...
Oh, I want to open that up a little bit because I'm first of all, I want to say I'm 100% with you, and I have called safety stops before and literally been chewed out for doing so. And I think, when you have a producer like Gayle that you work closely with, Gayle would totally understand why you're calling a stop and respect that.
And vice versa.
Absolutely. I'm sorry, I should have said that naturally. And I was just trying to make the point of a crew member dealing with a producer.
Sure.
And of course, if a producer says stop, there's no question about it. You're working for the producer.
Right.
But when you're working on a film shoot and you don't know the producers, you don't know the crew, there is a pressure there to be a team player. You don't want to be the person that's causing problems. From a producing point of view, when you're hiring equipment, when you've got people together, when you're hiring a location, you are burning money.
Yeah.
If you can wrap it faster, you want to do that so that you don't have to spend as much. And unfortunately, that gets in the way of safety and procedure. And as this industry has transformed in the last 20 or 30 years, when I started, we were filming on 16 mil for low budget, 35 if you had a budget. If you had a budget, it was 35. So which meant that if you at 16 mil, if you were shooting 3 minutes worth of film stock to get the film stock, to process it, and then maybe get a copy on like pneumatic tape, that was $1,000. So you had to have that. That money was, you don't get that back. The minute you roll, you're done. And then that's on top of that, you've got camera equipment, hiring of actors, hiring a crew. Now that has dropped. Now you can go out and spend money on digital equipment, which means that people who don't have a budget or experience can now get into the game. Hey there, film lovers. I hope you're really enjoying this episode of Cinematic Perspective, but I wanted to take a moment out and share with you a brand new project I'm super excited about. It's called Spectacular Distraction, where I uncover hidden gems and forgotten classics from the 70s, 80s, and 90s. The movies and shows that shaped pop culture, but somehow slipped through the cracks. Remember those films that only aired once or twice, disappeared completely, but got stuck in your head? We'll find them, break them down. The rip-offs, the inspirations, and we'll go through and find out all the different pieces that are missing from cinema today. So if you're as obsessed with cinema and pop culture as I am, come on a nostalgic journey with me. Search for Spectacular Distraction on YouTube, hit subscribe, and never miss out on a hidden gem, deep dives, or iconic moments. Because everything else is just spectacular distraction. I do want to ask you what your worst experience on set with a firearm is, but I'm just going to share with you really quickly. I happened to be working on a student film. I was a camera operator. Worked out that they had a grip. The grip, unbeknownst to anyone at the time, had worked as an armorist, but had changed industries. And the director brought on a real firearm for a scene. Now, these were students. The excitement on set was incredible. The grip went up and said, "Can I see the gun?" And the director said, "It's unloaded." He said, "Cool, let me check it." He removed a clip from the gun that was fully loaded with 45 caliber hollow points. which means when you hit someone, it doesn't make a small little hole.
Right.
It shreds someone. You don't. If a bullet winged you, you would be walking away either with a loss of life or with a handicap for the rest of your life.
Right.
I'll never forget the director looked straight at this grip and said, "But my father told me it was unloaded," and the grip exploded. He actually dismantled the gun. He took the bullets and he walked off the set. And I remember he took the bullets. He said, "I'm not coming back here. It's a disaster. If you had picked it up and pulled the trigger, someone would have lost their life." Again, that's one of those moments that sometimes I wake up in the middle of the night and go, "Oh my gosh, I could have lost my life. Someone else could have lost their life," and it's not worth it for a student film, by the way, that aired in a class and maybe in a festival, and no one ever saw it again.
Unlike Wyatt, who grew up around guns, I never did, and I'm not necessarily comfortable around guns. And so when we were prepping for Shadowland, there was the discussion of what are we going to do with
Which is our feature-length
vampire
film, yeah. That we did.
Catch it on Amazon Prime.
Yeah, exactly. But so there was the discussion when we were in pre-production about what are we going to use for guns. And Wyatt had talked about how good the digital muzzle flashes are.
Mm-hmm.
And our executive producer collects guns. He has guns. So he was like, "Oh, we can just use guns. Let's use real guns." And I was pretty adamant about, no, let's not. Just, that was my first feature. Again, I wasn't comfortable with guns. We didn't have the money to hire an actual armorist. And so we actually went with the airsoft on that one.
Which still have a little potential for danger, but markedly less dangerous than real guns.
And did you use digital muzzle flashes in that film?
Yeah.
Because it's interesting, with everything that's going on with Rust, someone made the point that John Wick 3, which is very heavy with firearms,
right,
every shot was digitally placed in the film.
Okay, real versus digital, the pros and cons. And listen, I'll be the first one to say I've been on set where people are firing blank weapons and it looks spectacular. The layperson may not realize that sometimes you can fire a multitude of blanks on camera and not even get all the flashes because the camera shutter is cycling closed as the flash happens. So if you fire 8 or 10 shots out of a blank firing gun and you get all 8 or 10 flashes on camera, you actually got pretty darn lucky there.
So they might have to augment them anyway.
But I just don't think people realize the process. So
if you don't see the flash through the eyepiece, if you're using a camera, it means that there's a good chance you missed it. And I remember that was one of the things that when I was going through training to be a cinematographer, that's one of the things they're always like, make sure that you're in a safe place and you're comfortable, because you want to be looking, you don't want to look at the monitor, you want to look through the eyepiece, because what you're seeing there is coming directly from the gate in the camera.
So I want to look at a film like Aliens, and I want to say, I think they were using some stuff in Aliens where it was ejecting a small wooden plug into a metal block that was put in the barrel, but between the powder load and the little wooden block, it was hitting the end of the barrel and it was pulverizing and it was burning. And there are scenes in Aliens where they're spraying, the aliens, and they've got their pulse rifles and they're firing, and you're getting the kick and you're getting the muzzle flash. And it looks spectacular because it's about as close to real as you can get without actually firing slugs. Yes, it's impressive. Yes, it looks good. For low-budget filmmakers, though, we've done stuff where we have battery-powered airsoft guns where when you pull the trigger, the slide moves. We then synchronize and rehearse with still camera flash packs.
So that you get the light reflecting
so you get the interactive
off of the
lighting.
other actor.
And then when you go through a digital library and find the proper size and style of muzzle flash for that gun and composite it, you really don't know any difference. What I then come up against is young filmmakers who have now grown up on a diet of Christopher Nolan, who does stuff as real as he can, but he's got hundreds of millions of dollars, he's got a ton of people, and he's got a lengthy schedule. So then young filmmakers come to set, And, they've kind of been warned off on digital and they've become very leery of digital. They want real. And I think it's all on a sliding scale. Do I think we should stay away from blank firing weapons? No, not necessarily. But I think, when you're young and you're inexperienced and you're trying to copy, a big studio film by a big experienced filmmaker, you don't have the time and money and experience to be able to do that. And I think it's all a matter of weighing these options. Are you actually going to get the benefit of firing real blanks? So you asked about the worst experience.
Yes.
I don't have any particularly bad gun experiences on a set other than when we were working on Guyver Dark Hero in 1993. We were getting into production on Guyver Dark Hero, and Brandon Lee had just recently been killed. So there was a heightened sense of, I'm going to say paranoia, which is justifiable. But I remember we were getting ready to shoot some scenes involving guns, and several crew people, like this person you were talking about, brought in real guns.
Yeah.
And they didn't bring them to set directly, and they didn't bring them to the day of, but they were bringing them in and showing the director and showing the stunt supervisor and going, hey, look, you can use this. And the stunt supervisor started getting very upset and basically he turned to the director at one point and he said, look, this is the kind of thing I'm talking about. This is the kind of thing that can happen, that can snowball. And he's like, you got to shut this down. You got to tell actors and crew people, don't bring your weapons in. Our armorer will handle this. He will deal with it. So that was the closest we got to a bad scenario. I've had bad experiences with other things. I was on a film in 1989 called Dead Men Don't Die. And this differentiates between circumstance and the odds and unprofessionalism and irresponsibility. On this film, Dead Men Don't Die, we were doing driving shots at night where we had a shot maker, which then you hooked a car up to the shot maker.
And the shot maker's a truck?
The shot maker's a truck with all these camera rigs on it and a jib arm mounted on it. And it's built as a camera platform to tow a vehicle and get shots of the vehicle. So the driver's basically behind the wheel of the vehicle and he's being pulled around by a camera car that has all these cool camera mounts on it or can do moving shots. But to shoot with a shot maker, you have to have permission to do it, but then you hire an off-duty police officer who rides ahead of you on a motorcycle usually and clears the road. He will go up to the stoplight and he will go out into the middle of the intersection and he will hold traffic so your shot maker can roll through, and he basically keeps you safe. The police officer went up into the intersection ahead of us to clear the way, and a drunk driver came through the intersection, hit him broadside, pushed him 20, 30 feet into a curb. The car went up onto him, basically crushed him and killed him.
Jeez.
And we shut down production for a couple of days, and we came back and we finished. Now, that's not anybody's incompetence.
Not safety. Yeah.
That's the fall of circumstances. That's just bad odds and a drunk driver. But then this leads to other questions. So I have a whole list of stuff here where, Art Shaw was a stunt pilot on the film Top Gun, and they had cameras mounted on his biplane, and he was going to put his biplane into a flat spin to get actual shots, because in the film, Maverick's jet goes into a flat spin. Well, he was going to recreate the flat spin in his biplane. He couldn't pull out of it. He crashed from the flat spin, and he died. Is that worth it? And I think it's weird. Top Gun, that reminds me of Tom Cruise. We've all seen the crazy stuff Tom Cruise does. He does it with an incredible amount of training, as much safety as is humanly possible. But let's face it, Tom Cruise does some stuff. He swung from a wire off the top of the tallest building in the world, Burj Dubai or Burj Khalifa, whichever one it was. He's 130 stories off the ground, swinging around the building on a wire, doing these stunts. He's climbing the side of the building. But let's face it, if safety fails, that's it for Tom Cruise. And will the world say, oh my God, we need to review the safety procedures on every film ever made? Or will they go, well, that sucks. Tom Cruise took a chance and he lost, and oh well, Tom Cruise has died. That's sad. So there's a difference there between what's a justifiable risk, what's the spectacle of filmmaking, and what's media hype. Because right now, my question is, do films need a serious going over because of what happened on Alec Baldwin's film? Or are, generally speaking, films pretty good? I know you spoke recently of the near strike that we had with IATSE. And IATSE was basically saying, we need better conditions. And we do need better conditions.
I'm 100% behind the strike. I think that, as a crew person, those long days do take a toll. Recently, I was listening to a interview with, I mentioned it before, with John Carpenter, and he mentioned that the Directors Guild did approach them around 2010, trying to explain to the Producers Guild that if you work 3 days a week, you get more done because people are rested, people can plan things out.
Sure.
And they didn't want to hear about it. And I mean, his quote was, the film industry likes to punish you. Right? It's like, you start at 7 a.m. and no one wants to do anything creative at 7 a.m. And as the week goes by, they push back the call time. So by Friday, you're working in the middle of the night, basically to cheat you because you haven't got the weekend then to recover. So it's kind of a, my heart goes out to those who are doing 14-hour days with no breaks, no lunch, because the penalties are not, it's worthwhile for the production to just pay the penalty because it's just nothing.
Right.
And push people so hard. It is a real shame. Something has to change. Some people were making some jokes about what had happened on Rust. And I kind of were like, just be quiet. They're like, why? And I'm like, because that could have been me. That could have been anyone, people that I know, friends, people that I consider family. This isn't too far removed for your ability to go and enjoy yourself for 90 minutes, 2.5 hours, 3 hours. You're expecting people to actually put their lives at risk. The same example that I gave about handing out those guns on that independent film, the set was a burnt out building. And I remember we did a recce on it. And we came back and some kids obviously had been there, maybe drinking because there was all this broken glass.
Sure.
And the first thing I said was, we need to clean up the glass. And the producer and the director said, don't worry about it. And I went, you do know your character runs barefoot.
Oh, geez.
The main actor is barefoot in this shot. And they went, well, if you're so concerned, you do it. And I did. I went and cleaned up the glass and then went and spent an hour sprinkling dirt and all the rest of it so it didn't look like, this clear patch. And at that point, I said, it's not worth anyone cutting themselves up, let alone if they fell. But, it's not Die Hard, dude. It's not shoot the glass,
Right.
I really learned that if you don't take responsibility, and there's this idea of like, if it's a concern to you, then you do it, right? People don't want to take on extra. It's about the ego of, well, I'm the producer or I'm the director. I don't want to deal with that sort of stuff. I know for myself, and I'm going to speak for you right now, Wyatt, and if I'm wrong, please correct me. I know that if I need something done, and that means I've got to be up till 4 a.m. and I'm shooting at 6 or 7 a.m. and there's no one else to do it, and I'm up till 4 a.m. doing it.
Yeah.
And that's my love out of, the project and seeing it through and making sure that I'll do whatever I need to do to get it done, except for when it comes to someone's safety. So I don't know about you guys, but I couldn't live with myself if someone got hurt, let alone fatally.
Well, it's fascinating because I probably have put myself in more danger. Gayle and I, during the making of Shadowland, where I was the writer-director and she was the producer of this $250,000 feature film, I was key to a lot of the function of a lot of the effects on the set. I had to prep things overnight. I had to do storyboards. I had to do script changes.
What did we figure out? Between us, we were sleeping 2 to 5 hours a night.
Yeah, 5 hours was a good night's sleep. But then there were times where she and I would talk and we were not sure how we got home. We'd black out somewhere along the route and we'd wake up parked at home. Like we'd snap out of a daze and I don't know how we got home. And she was driving a 30-foot Penske truck every day. So And I said earlier, where's the balance? What's the hype? What's justifiable and what isn't it? My real opinion is I'm stunned there aren't more people injured on sets. I'm stunned
Sure.
that more people in independent films don't get seriously injured and or killed. And that's, I'm not trying to be sarcastic or pessimistic about it. Maybe people are being more careful than we think they are, but I want to definitely clarify the difference between a foolhardy person versus an accident. Like art.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, there's another flying incident. There's a man named Paul Mance, and Paul Mance died working on the original Flight of the Phoenix with Jimmy Stewart, which is the plane crashes in the desert and they cut the plane apart and they build a new plane out of all the parts and they fly the new plane out of the desert and back to the world. Paul Mance was flying the reconstructed version of the Phoenix, the cobbled together plane, and he was doing touch and go sequences for the camera, and he hit the ground a little too hard on one of the touch and goes, and the plane broke apart and cartwheeled, and he was killed instantly. A calculated risk, a structural failure, horrible incompetence that needed an industry-wide investigation. No, just a bad set of circumstances and a miscalculation and a structural failure. But then you've got Sarah Jones, who was the girl who was working on the Midnight Rider, which was the Greg Allman story.
Unbelievable story.
And basically they were filming a dream sequence, and there was all kinds of communication about, well, I didn't think there was supposed to be a train on these tracks, but they built a bed and they put it on the tracks on a trestle. And basically, oh my God, there is a train coming, and everybody started to run off the tracks. And Sarah didn't get hit by the train, but the train hit the bed exploded, the debris hit Sarah, and that's what killed Sarah. That was just plain good old-fashioned foolhardiness and lack of preparation. And I definitely want to clarify the difference between
An accident
and a calculated risk versus irresponsibility and lack of proper preparation, or even lack of knowledge. There's two distinctly different things there. And again, it remains to be seen where this whole thing on Rust with Alec Baldwin settles. That it was, the collapse of chain of command, the lack of discipline, incompetence.
You're talking about the Sarah
The
Jones thing.
camera crew had walked out.
Yes.
That morning, they had walked out citing lack of pay and safety issues. The only person who stayed from that camera crew was the director of photography.
And apparently she was very upset because she felt like she'd lost her team. She was apparently in tears that day because, oh my God, all my people who I've been working with, who I love, they're gone. And yeah, it's such a...
She had fought for them. I believe one of the things that they were complaining about was that they had to drive an hour to their to basically where the hotel was, and
they were told they would have hotels closer to set. Yeah.
So they were like,
yeah.
This is we're at risk. We're pulling these long days, and we can't get there without it being at risk. So this is probably the worst chain of events for how this actually kind of can actually happen. I mean, I'm kind of lost for words, but to shoot the director of photography and the director, both of them were standing next to each other.
Right.
To lose your photographer, your director. I mean, you can joke and say people get frustrated and they always want to shoot the director or the
but they rarely do it.
But I mean, yeah, to actually be in that situation is horrendous. And there's some things that have come through. I'm not going to say names, but even though it's public, but the person who was acting as the armorist was actually the daughter of a very well-known trick shooter who has worked as an armorist. She was in her early 20s. And I believe at this point there has been no clarification if she was on set or not, if she was actually there at the time.
Right.
Wow,
Right.
I hadn't heard that.
And the other thing that was interesting is that it has been also documented that crew who had downtime had taken that weapon, that firearm, the lead kind of hero gun, and was plinking with it, was shooting live ammunition at beer bottles at lunchtime. which does explain why there may have been a live round in that firearm.
Right.
Again, to me, I've never been on a film set where you were able to play with props.
Right.
You know, I'm quite fanatical about props. I like to recreate things. I become friends with the prop people as such on set. Most of them know me. The closest I've ever gotten was, oh, we have something standby that we didn't paint and we're not going to use it. We're wrapped. Do you want it? And you know, and I've been lucky enough to have had that happen. But when there is a prop on set, you can't go up and touch it. You can't, because if that gets broken, that takes away time from the shoot, and time is everything. So again, you know, I remember one film shoot where I was actually I think it was Men in Black 2. I think it was, and an extra had one of the pistols, one of the chrome pistols, and I remember I was on one of the cameras. I was the backup of the camera, and I was measuring the focal length, and I turned to him, I'm like, you know, can I just see that real quick? And he showed it to me. I said, thanks. And he goes, and afterwards he came up, he goes, oh, take a look. And I said, no, it's cool. You hold it. I don't want anything to happen to it because they'll kill me. And he's like, oh, okay. But that's as close as you can get. That's really as close as at least my experience. So the idea that crew had access to something that was a prop, let alone a firearm, is a huge red flag.
Yeah.
You know, and we've been talking about the safety of handling the guns on set. But another aspect of safety with having a gun on set is the neighborhood, the police, the surrounding area. One thing that we're really careful about doing is letting the municipality of police know that we are filming and that we will have a gun on set. And for me as the producer, I will call them a couple of days before and say, hey, we're going to be filming in this neighborhood. We're going to have a gun. I'll call them the day before. I'll call them that morning. I call them at lunch break. And then I call them when we wrap so that if there is a gun in the area, that they know that it's not us. However,
because you would think that police are of a professional level, that this information is passed on properly and it is told from one person to the next. No, it is not, because sometimes there are shift changes. Sometimes people do not write stuff down in their ledger there at the command desk, or sometimes people fail to tell other people stuff.
And what happens when something like that gets failed to pass
on? If you're shooting in a neighborhood and you're chasing around with guns, it is possible that someone in the neighborhood can call and say, hey, there's people brandishing guns on the highway overpass near my house. And the police come screeching over and order you down off the overpass and say, what are you doing?
The police with their guns drawn.
With their guns drawn, and the lead actors are going, whoa, it's fake, it's fake.
Hi, it's Gayle. And if pickleball is your kind of fun, let me introduce you to Backhanded Compliments. It's a brand I started with my niece Evie, and it began as a project she was doing in college for a design class. But when I saw the art, I knew we had to do something more with it. So we launched Backhanded Compliments, which is irreverent pickleball apparel for the passive-aggressive pickleball player. We've got graphic tees with phrases on them like, that was so good for a beginner, or make me a sandwich or get out of the kitchen. You can find everything at backhandedpickleball.com. Be sure to use promo code podcast for 15% off your first order.
Did you have a safety thing? Did you have a safety brief about that? Because I'm just curious. I've been on sets where they say if the police turn up, immediately place the gun down and put your hands up.
I don't know that we had a specific safety briefing, but our lead actor was smart enough that he took the gun by the point and basically put it down. He put it down and backed away. So he had the common sense to do this. But the police then were furious with her and I, brought us down.
I brought over our paperwork and talked to them.
I then turned to the director of photography because we were losing the light, and I said, finish getting the shot. And the actor acted like he had his gun stuffed in his back belt, which he didn't. And they continued shooting while Gayle and I went over. And what was interesting was that the police officer was pissed. But then he realized, he called dispatch, and dispatch went through the notes and said, oh yeah, these guys have permits, they've called in. And then he was mad at dispatch, and heads rolled somewhere back at the headquarters. And he didn't apologize, because cops don't apologize, but he basically looked at Gayle and I and said, you guys are cool. He said, you guys are okay, your stuff's in order, dispatch is the problem. But see, even
But that's
there,
dangerous.
Yeah.
Even there.
Incredibly
because,
dangerous.
Yeah, because these cops didn't know what was going on, and they've got blinders on in a way, because all they know is there's a guy with a gun on the overpass.
How many times have they run into somebody with a gun who's got a bullshit story or starts going,
Absolutely.
no, man, what it was and they launch into their crap story about why they have a loaded gun where they're not supposed to. And so, yeah, I don't blame the cops at all. On another day, I'll tell you a story about getting stopped by the cops and getting put in handcuffs in Los Angeles because there had been a shooting on a local freeway. So, of course, when they saw the film crew near the freeway with prop guns, I want to update my story about worst gun story on set, because you and I are both involved in this, and I just remembered this. We loaned a local production. The director wanted to use fake guns. She did not want to use real guns. She wanted to use fake guns. She knew we had a collection of airsoft guns. We had a very pretty, realistic-looking prop airsoft shotgun with a pump action, but it was an airsoft gun. She wanted to do a robbery scene in a gas station using this airsoft gun. No problem, let me loan you the gun.
But the actor and the DP...
and the actor was also a producer on the project.
He was financing it too.
Really wanted to use a real shotgun. And he lobbied for it, and the director said no. Well, I think they had barely even started shooting the scene. Maybe they had rehearsed it. Maybe they had done one take. And he was so enthusiastically marching into the scene and, air cocking that thing. And he broke the airsoft shotgun.
He snapped it in half.
He basically snapped off the stock. He was so enthusiastically racking the thing. And ultimately, they ended up using the real shotgun.
Because he happened to have it in the car.
Of course he did.
So I'm not saying he purposely broke the airsoft gun, but as an actor, I can tell you, there are actors who lose it in the reality of the moment and go nuts. We've stopped renting our airsoft guns out to crews because the guns constantly came back broken. And you could tell an actor, this is a plastic airsoft gun. You cannot do crazy shit with this. You can't bash it into things. You can't do a rolling forward dive with it and crumple your full weight on it. And regardless of that, we would still we'd get all of our guns back broken. So we just stopped. We're currently shooting our little movie, which we've talked about occasionally, and it's on hold right now due to other work things. But throughout the film, my character carries a gun, and it's another airsoft gun that I've had for years, and it's just me and her on set. But even so, I'm aware of the gun. I've fixed the gun so that it can't be fired. I've fixed the gun so that it can't be loaded. It goes into a little safety case and it's stored. And it's just she and I on set. And there's never a circumstance where I pointed at her or pointed at the camera. So, all these things. Anyway, I wanted to revise my safety story. That's my new most dangerous story on set, is despite not wanting that damn shotgun active on set, that shotgun ended up active on set because a producer wanted it to be active on set.
And nothing bad happened with it, but there wasn't anybody who was officially an armorist. There wasn't...
Right.
We don't know. I mean, the guy went and pulled it out of the back of his car, so who knows what was done with it prior
and
to
I think
that.
you and I were just visiting set. I don't know if we left at that point.
I kind of think we did.
We don't know if somebody checked it. We don't know if we don't know if he at least had the common sense to check it. I don't know. But basically, his personal shotgun ended up on set.
First of all, it scares me that I've worked certain jobs where they go, do you have any weapons? No. Do you have any weapons in your car? No. All right. Because that's a question you have to ask. And, the idea that he had brought this shotgun to set is in, people are emotional people. Sometimes you have an argument, you never know where it's going to go.
That's the whole argument about guns. Yeah, that's the whole argument about guns. Is you can get pissed, and if there's no guns, you're just pissed. If you get pissed and there's guns, you don't know where that's. Anyway, that's a whole.
You can change your life and someone
very
else's
quickly.
life in a heartbeat. If there's one thing that I want to leave people with the realization and the understanding is that if you are going to work on a film set, if you are going to be crew, if you're going to put together your own film project, when it comes to safety, it can't be taken for granted.
Yes.
Some of the examples we're talking here, people did not lose their life as dramatically as what happened last week, but people do end up with injuries that they sometimes deal with in the meantime or throughout their life. I was actually you were talking about doing stupid things. My last film at university, I did a pratfall onto concrete, and to this day deal with the fact that I damaged like my hip, and it was it was a squib, it was the whole thing. I had a little bit of a like a mattress down, and I missed the mattress completely, and I threw myself backwards, and you know what, that happens.
Yeah.
That was my call. I was the director, I was the producer. It was my little cameo. It looks great on camera, right? But was it worth it? Absolutely not.
Right.
You need to be aware of a number of things, and the main reason why things happen, why accidents happen, is the pressure of getting the shot and the time constraints.
Yeah.
I don't know about the both of you, but I have tried to ask people just to slow down a little bit, and have been, that kind of feedback gets received like I'm the pariah non-team player that's going to destroy the production. and it's very hard to take when what you're doing is you're looking out for everyone, not just yourself, but other people on set. Because believe me, when they shut down a set, it's going to take a lot longer than saying to someone, let's take a moment and work out a plan, or let's go through this and just make sure that we're safe in doing so.
My producer brain thinks about you talking about just, the safety on set, and that there's a lot that goes into it. And we were talking earlier about how you work in the long hours and everybody gets tired, and as the project goes on, you get more and more tired, and you may be making stupid decisions because of that exhaustion. So much of that can be eliminated in the pre-production process, in the planning ahead before that exhaustion hits, while you're still sitting there working things out on paper and knowing that, hey, on day 13, we're going to be filming this. We have to make sure that we've got all of our ducks in a row. And by planning it well in advance, when the day comes and you are tired and you're not thinking as straight, you've got all this stuff on a list.
You made a plan, now stick to the plan.
Yeah.
Don't change the plan on the day of.
Unfortunately, plans do change. I mean, it's quite normal that something comes up, someone's unavailable, you shift it around, but at least you've got an idea of what is coming up.
You've got that, in effect, checklist. So even if things do change, you're like, okay, well, we got somebody new coming in, but we still need to do these things.
Right.
That if you were just working on your exhausted production brain, you might not even be thinking about those things.
Okay, filmmakers out there who are listening, maybe you're young, maybe you're less experienced. You've seen Christopher Nolan films. You've seen practical effects. You want it to be real. Filmmaking is not life and death. Don't make it life and death. I know you get caught up in the moment, and this is your movie, and you're so passionate about it, and I get it. But take a moment and count to 10 and ask yourself what the potential repercussions can be. And let me say, there's always an alternative. Every time you think you're limited in something, I really wanted to do squibs. I really wanted to do live explosions on a body. If you can't practically do them, you can do digital blood hits. You can do digital hits of all different kinds. I know they're digital. They don't look as real. But do you want to risk the injury and the disaster that can happen?
You can do bloody spit wads.
We've done so many things. We've done car crashes. We've done explosions. We've done all kinds of physical effects in post as miniatures, as digital effects. We've done them so many different ways. Okay, maybe they're not as effective as, a Christopher Nolan film. Maybe they don't look like The Dark Knight, but we're still able to tell the story. There's always a tool, and there's always an alternative.
If you are serious about filmmaking, then you can find a way visually to tell a story instead of doing the stunt. If you get into the mechanics of being able to create visual storytelling, there's always another way. So don't feel that you have to use a gun or a real effect. You can actually be able to create that same moment to drive your story, sometimes in a better way than actually using something that's practical. And I think that's one of the things that I've been noticing about a number of, especially independent films. The discipline of the actual craft is kind of missing, so we'll just throw money at it. Throwing money at it is, let's get some weapons, let's get some guns, let's get some effects, let's get some CGI, go back to the basics. If you really are dedicated to having a career here, learn what people have done beforehand and then build upon that.
Sure, because ultimately it's the story that's the important part of it, not necessarily the big flashy effects.
And use that as well when it comes to safety. Build upon what the procedures that are in place are because of people like Hexam and Lee who have lost their lives. So that's why people check the barrel. That's why they check to see if there's anything lodged in it. That's why, props aren't sitting on a table and they're locked up with an armorist so someone can't, pick something up, think that there isn't a problem, put it to their head and lose their life. It's a really unfortunate lesson to learn. I hope people got something out of this conversation. I'm heartbroken, especially since there was a cinematographer that lost their life. And I hope that we never have to have a conversation like this due to something in the news, coming about. It's just so not worth it.
Thank you all for listening. I hope you'll really consider a lot of the things that we've said, the safety tips we've offered. I hope you'll think twice anytime you're going to do something that has the potential to injure anyone else on a set. But, you should always go out and make your films, and you should always go out and try and get your vision. Just be safe in the process. Absolutely. So please, everyone, if you like what we're doing here, come and click like, subscribe to us, follow us on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and every place else that we are. TikTok, I hear, these days. But please tune in next time for another episode of Cinematic Perspective. And thank you so much for listening. Be safe.
All right, be safe out there.